here to talk about some of the customizations I've done for our office system in Cary, North Carolina, using Asterisk Dialplan for the most part. Before coming to TWR, I worked in the aerospace industry, and I got to work on some very cool, interesting projects. This is one of my favorites. It was a constellation of communication satellites, and I will buy a chocolate bar for anybody who can name the satellite with the serial number. But don't worry, there's only a few of them in orbit, but it's still flying. A little bit about TWR. We are the farthest reaching Christian media ministry in the world. We broadcast and distribute Bible-based content in 230 languages and dialects. We have partners in 160 countries, and we have a bigger radio footprint than the BBC or Voice of America. Asterisk has been a great success story for us at TWR. After I replaced the legacy phone system in our North Carolina office, I've installed 10 other servers around the world and in the various TWR offices, and it's completely changed the way that we communicate between our offices. And when I first came on staff with TWR, my job was to replace the legacy Cisco Call Manager phone system. A VoIP contractor 5 years previously had worked with the staff to build out the system into a configuration that was useful for our organization. And my job was to make it do exactly what Cisco Call Manager did. And all the while, it was very important that we not have any downtime, because as a nonprofit organization, we get a lot of our income through our phone system. So I made all the customizations that were needed, and I made a lot of others since then. Because Asterisk is so very adaptable, I provided the staff with a lot of capabilities that were not really feasible or not really affordable with the Cisco system. So I'm going to be talking about 4 of them today: a conference bridge dispatch, automated announcements, a panic button, and I talked a little bit about that at the keynote session this morning, and database-driven call routing. There's a lot of ways to customize Asterisk. As you can visualize from this pile of Lego bricks, you can do just about anything. Dialplan code is the main way to affect Asterisk behavior. But because Asterisk runs on top of Linux, and you saw that in the previous talk, you can do a lot of things with shell scripting. And then I use cron tab and at to trigger events. A couple of years back, Leif Madsen and Russell Bryant collaborated on this very interesting book. It's got a lot of good techniques, and so if you're interested in this, you can buy a electronic copy of this from O'Reilly, and you can learn a lot more. So in my presentation today, I'm going to show a list of ingredients, just kind of as a shout out to Leif and Russell. In our legacy Cisco phone system, we had 5 conference bridges that were licensed, and they had to be scheduled like a conference room with our Exchange server, and there was a lot of times there was conflicts. So because Asterisk is so much easier to configure, I was able to do something much different. This recipe is just Dialplan code, and it's very simple. But because Asterisk is extensible and open source, I was able to create a conference bridge for every employee. And the way it works is they dial a single extension, they're prompted for a conference bridge number, and then the conference bridge is announced to them prior to them joining it. So here's the first part of the Dialplan code. In this example, 2363 comes directly into this conference, or into this context. It prompts the user for the bridge number. And then I have because the bridge number is accessible from the outside, I don't want to tie up a trunk if somebody is just sitting there waiting. So I have a timeout counter and a loop that will time this out. And if you guys, I'm sorry for the legibility, but if you want to get this, I'll have a GitHub address at the very end. I've got all of this code on GitHub. Now, some people want to record their conferences. Some people want to have a different hold music class for their conferences. And so those are shown as separate extensions here. But by and large, that first line that matches 2 digits does all the work. And then I use the sub-conference bridge subroutine to just announce the bridge before the person enters. And this is easy to do in FreePBX also. You just lift this code, put it into extensions custom, and then you create a custom extension with that as the destination. And the new version of FreePBX, in version 13, that's I think going to go stable this week, you can use their new function called config edit and paste this code in that way. We have a morning devotions meeting every morning at 8:15. And historically, the receptionist would announce this over the PA system and remind the employees that this meeting was starting in 2 minutes. But sometimes the receptionist is processing visitors or is distracted at that time and doesn't make the announcement at the right time. So I came up with an automated solution. And what you need is a pre-recorded announcement, a shell script, a cron tab entry, the definition of your endpoints that you want to play out the announcement to, and then a small bit of dial plan code. So the announcement needs to occur every morning to 8:13. And so we had a voice artist that recorded the announcement, and cron schedules that for 8:13 every day, Monday through Friday. And the heart of this solution is what's called a call file. I don't know how many of you have used call files before, but it's a special file that triggers Asterisk to initiate a phone call as defined in the call file. And using this method, you have to tell Asterisk how to perform the call like you would in a dial application, and then what to do when the call is connected. You can read all about call files in the Asterisk wiki. So cron schedules the script to execute. In my example, the shell script actually creates the call file and puts it into the outgoing spool. Asterisk immediately executes that call file. So at 8:13 and some number of milliseconds every day, this happens. And the call file connects an extension to the page application, and that actually plays out the announcement. And here's my shell script. Basically, it just creates the call file and moves it into the outgoing spool. One of the things about call files is you have to move them into the spool directory. You can't create them directly into that directory because Asterisk may read an incomplete file if that happens. So I've highlighted the contents of the call file itself in yellow. And you can see the local channel 3998, and that's going to be connected to the announce context extension S. And then I designate a caller ID as well. So in the announce context, in the user's context, I have this extension. All it does is answers the call, waits 15 seconds, and then hangs up. And the extension, the announcement is less than 15 seconds long. In the global section, I've defined my SIP endpoints that are going to receive the announcement. And these are all similar technology endpoints. In my case, they're Linksys SPA phones, or Cisco SPA phones, and they all use the same SIP headers. And then in the announce context, I add the header, and I use page to page it out to all of those extensions. I have the announcement here, and I'm hoping this will play. Page it basically just takes, it's almost like dial, or even playback, but it accepts a list of arguments of endpoints to send the page to, and then the announcement is the option A. So the file name is called 2 minutes to Devo.
Wow. So, okay, so that variable there, age extensions, that's a list of them.
That's what I defined up here. So what happens is the server initiates a phone call to each one of those endpoints at the same time, or close to the same time.
Right.
And you hear it all over the building.
Wow.
So the announcement, you set up the call file, you set up the shell script to manipulate the file, schedule it with cron. And one thing that's very nice about this is I can execute this script from the command line anytime during the day. So if somebody wants another announcement to happen at a particular time, I can schedule that with or just do it on the command line. Now you might want to use different extensions for different length announcements, and you might want to use multicast RTP if your phones support that, and you could add logic for different announcements by day of week. With the growing threat of workplace violence, our security team asked me for an automated announcement to indicate a lockdown mode for our organization. And they want it to be activated by a central button. And so I wrestled with this for a while. What you're going to need is an ATA, like a Linksys 2102. And again, a call file, a pre-recorded announcement, the paging devices, and the dial plan code. Now in this example, I use a little bit different technique. But the thing that I was struggling with was how do I get a button to initiate the phone call? And I thought, well, I get one of the Algo door phones, and do it that way. But that's a pretty pricey option. I had a couple of these Linksys 2102 ATAs that I wasn't using, and I dug into it a little bit, and I figured out that if you short the tip and ring connectors together, you can initiate a phone call with a special digit map on these ATAs. And once the call's in the system, it's easy. So this is the dial plan, or the digit map, that's used in the Linksys ATA. And basically what this does is, as soon as the phone comes off hook, or those two lines are shorted, it calls extension 8999 at that address, which is my PBX. And here's the call file. It looks a lot like the other one. The difference is it goes into the lockdown extension, and it plays out a different sound file. And here's the dial plan code. So I set a database flag because I want to make sure that the status is maintained in lockdown until we get the all clear from the police department. And in this case, I use the dial plan to actually move the file into the outgoing spool. I use the system command to do that. And I promised everybody that you'd be able to hear the sound that Allison recorded for us. It's really very cool. Okay, so we created the call file. We set up a button to initiate that call. We defined the endpoints to receive the call. And then we set up the dial plan to actually move the file into the spool and initiate the whole sequence again.
Can we talk about that hardware interface to the ATA one?
I will, but let me get through the rest of my talk because there's some complexity in my next example, and if I don't get to it, let's talk afterwards. So using the database, Asterisk database to route calls isn't really anything new. FreePBX does it. If you're using a real-time Asterisk, you use the database extensively. But having easy access to a couple of extensions and being able to change the routing based on the database contents is pretty handy. One of the big advantages of doing this is that you don't have to reload the dial plan to change your dial plan behavior. And it's a lot easier to write a script to affect the Asterisk database than it is to write a script to edit or modify and reload the Asterisk dial plan. So I use this in two examples here. One is 800 number routing, and one is inclement weather closure information. TWR uses 800 numbers for special fundraisers, and most of the time these numbers just go to our regular IVR or the receptionist during daytime hours. But when the fundraising program is actually on the air, we want to route those calls to a special call queue where the people are ready to accept donations and talk to the callers. So the ingredients list here is pretty simple. If you're going to use the database, you have to define what that database looks like and how you want to use that. You need some dial plan code, and then I'll show a script to modify the database. The dial plan code is actually extremely simple. So here's my database contents. These are the 4 800 number ring to extensions that I have defined. And what I show here is extension 3801 is going to ring to radio partner share context, extension S, priority 1. So these are going to be parameters that I pass to the go-to application in the dial plan code. All the other ones will just go to our regular auto attendant. Here's the dial plan code. It's just a couple of lines. So the single string matches all of the incoming numbers. It checks to see if the database entry exists for that particular key, and then it routes it to that. If there's a missing key in the database, it will route it to the day menu. So that's kind of the default behavior. And here's my shell script. Sometimes these fundraisers happen at an odd time zones, so I'm not always in the office when they start. For example, we might have a fundraiser that starts at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and that's 9 p.m. where I live. So I'll schedule this before I leave the office. And I just use R asterisk and use a database put to populate that database entry. And then I always want to get a notification that switchover actually worked at the right time. So I tell Asterisk to show the routes, and I pipe that into MUT and have it email me a notification. In North Carolina, we don't have any snow removal equipment, at least not in our town. I think we have one snow plow, but basically a snowflake will shut the city down. And so we have to close the office and then notify employees when it's okay to come back to work. So this one, we need dial plan code, and quite a bit of it actually. We need some special recordings, and we need the database keys. I had Allison Smith record the messages for us, and they basically correspond to the day that we're allowed to reopen, or the employees are allowed to come back to work for the office reopening. And then I wrote dial plan code to manipulate the database keys and to manipulate a string that's going to be passed to playback when the employee or the visitor calls. My requirements, it had to be really, really simple to use. There were only 2 people in the building that were allowed to use this, and they had to be able to select any weekday and any reopening time. And so I promised you a bit of dial plan code, and here it is. The first is an authentication. I use voicemail authenticate, but I use a special authenticate PIN number that only these 2 people have. This is not really the one, by the way. I practiced this talk at the office, and the guy said, "Oh, now I've got the code." I said, "No, you don't." So the weather admin welcome mix is a message that we had Allison record for us. Okay. And then I had her record a prompt for capturing the day of the week. So the user can enter 1 through 5 corresponding to Monday through Friday. And where's my cursor? There it is. Okay. Then I need to prompt them for the time. This is where it gets a little complicated because I accept 4 digits for time, and then I have to have it play out in a way that's intelligible to a human. So you'll see a bunch of match patterns here based on hour and minute, and then I read that back out and build a database entry with that string that I'm going to pass to playback. So that's what the rest of this dial plan code does. It sets the database value that I'm going to play back. So it's hours and minutes, and then it might be o'clock or 30 or AM or PM or noon, and then finally I play a confirmation message, and the person who's administering this can say, okay, I accept that, or no, I want to start all over, and it goes right back to the top. So like I said, the simplicity requirement drove complexity into the solution. So I've got these files, weather 1 through 5, and they correspond to we will reopen at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the day of the week, and then I've got some weather administration prompts that I had recorded. The database entries that I've shown here show that we are closed for inclement weather. We're going to reopen on Tuesday, which is weather 2, at 8:30 a.m. And as you can see, these are strings that I will pass to playback. And the dial plan that actually plays this out is very simple. It's part of our normal day menu. I check to see if the weather closure status is set to true, and then I play that back. So hopefully you can hear this. So all of that to make a fairly intelligible message that is all automated. So we've talked about conference room dispatch, automated announcements in a couple of flavors, the panic button, and database-driven call routing. I want to encourage everyone here to make your dial plan do what you want it to do, so dig in. That's all I have this morning. I'm sorry?
What's the address where you get the code?
Right there. Can you see that in the back? It's GitHub, Cassius Smith, Astricon. And I've got all of these in separate files there. Send me an email if you use them.
Can you back to the slide with your email address?
Oh, sure. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so when did you start using Asterisk, and like how did you put together a business case to go in that direction?
That's an interesting story, and actually I was approached by the CIO. He asked me if I'd ever heard of Asterisk. This was before I went on staff with TWR, and I laughed at him because I said, Mark Spencer is a friend of mine and a Facebook friend of mine, and the product manager for Asterisk now is a friend of mine, and he goes to church with my son. And I've been driving by Asterisk headquarters every day for the last 10 years. So yes, I've heard of Asterisk. And he was the one that actually wanted to roll Cisco out because it was costing the organization $10,000 a year in maintenance.
So Cisco is a PBX provider?
Yes, yes. And I replaced a $150,000 phone system for $9,000. So, yeah. Thank you. Yes. Okay, and you had a, sir, you had a question about the hardware. And why don't we talk afterwards? It actually works just beautifully. I love the solution.
About the hardware, the SPA1 or 2, do you actually have button something somewhere, or the guy will just remove the phone?
No, it's actually a push button that we've run flat wire in and into the RJ9 plug or RJ11 into the ATA. So the ATA just sees it as the phone comes off hook. Okay? Anything else? I'm happy to talk to anyone afterwards, either about TWR or about Asterisk. So thanks for coming this morning.
Thank you.